Over the past couple of weeks, I've been gradually reading this book, Dangerous Calling, The Unique Challenges of Pastoral Ministry by Paul David Tripp. His emphasis really is that our biggest problem is a heart problem. It's not about demands of ministry or difficulties that pastors may find. Our biggest problem is our own hearts. Now that's the same for all of us, and I'd like to read you a paragraph that yes, he's writing to ministers, but a lot of this book relates to us all as believers in the Lord Jesus. He says the pastor must be enthralled by, in awe of, can I say it, in love with his Redeemer, so that everything he thinks, desires, chooses and decides, says and does is propelled by love for Christ and the security of rest in the love of Christ. He must be regularly exposed, humbled, assured and given rest by the grace of his Redeemer. His heart needs to be tenderized day after day by his communion with Christ, so that he becomes tender, loving, patient, forgiving, encouraging, and a giving servant leader. His meditation of Christ, his presence, his promises, and his provisions must not be overwhelmed by his meditation on how to make his ministry work, or how to make your ministry work, or how to make your life work. And I think that ties in so well, doesn't it, in what we've been looking at over these weeks in Hebrews. We have to look to Jesus. We have to fix our eyes on Jesus every day and throughout every day. We must not allow other things to overwhelm our view of Jesus and his love and his grace for us. Paul David Tripp goes on to refer to David. Let me read to you from 1 Samuel 17 as David comes up and faces the big threat in his life and the life of Israel at that time. This is 1 Samuel 17 from verse 43. And the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field." And then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of heaven, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the hosts of the Philistine this day to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all his assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." When the Philistine rose and came and drew near to meet David, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet the Philistine. And David put it in his hand, his bag, and took out a stone and slung it and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell on his face to the ground. Now we can draw the comparison and say we face giants, we face threats, and we're to look to God who will give us deliverance. And yet we can't say that God will always deliver us from every giant and everything that we face in life. But I want us to think about David's witness. He's telling us to look to God. But let's remember what Hebrews is saying. We look to the witness of the past heroes of faith like David, but ultimately, we listen to them, but ultimately we look to Jesus. And Jesus prayed, Jesus trusted his Father, but Jesus didn't win and defeat his enemies by cutting off their head, did he? By being the physical victor. Jesus won the greatest battle by giving his life. It seemed to all that were watching that Jesus had failed, that he was defeated. He was the one hanging on a cross. And yet it was through his death. He had faith that God was going to defeat Satan and God was going to bring about redemption, forgiveness for sinners like you and I, and countless millions from throughout history. So when we may feel that we're being defeated, when we think that God may have left us, we may think again of Job. In the midst of trials, we need faith to look to Jesus and to say, as Romans 8 reminds us again, that God is at work. We may not understand it, but we need faith to know that God is on our side. He is fighting for us, and we look not to our trials and our tribulations and the giants in our life, but we look to Jesus, and we trust that through him all things are working for good. Nothing will separate us from his love, and one day we will see the victory through Jesus. So folks, let's day by day look to him, and not just look to him, but fall in love with him and allow that love to overflow and to overshadow everything else in life.